Hey, Steve, you're muted on my end here, dude.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Hey,
Back
there's my boy.
today. Man, amateur hour here in week 8 of the NFL season. Okay, Rocky. Let me reset here. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back into Foolish Club Media. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy Rocky Magaña. Rocky, Week 8, the Kansas City Chiefs take down the Las Vegas Raiders 27-20 to improve to 7-0 on the season and remain the last undefeated team in the NFL. And Rocky, is a weird week across the NFL. The Ravens lost to the Browns today. Bunch of high scoring games in the first half of the day, a bunch of ugly, gross games in the second half of the day. Pretty typical day across the NFL in general. But the Kansas City Chiefs get it done. They get it done in some different ways than we've seen them get it done so far this season. And Rocky, it wasn't. It was far from flawless, as we've come to expect from this Kansas City Chiefs team. But they get it done, and they get it done in a way that I think we all kind of needed to see them get it done, because it wasn't quite the same way they've gotten things done so far this season.
No, really, it wasn't at all. But it got handled when it got handled, to quote Patrick Mahomes. It was one of those games where it really would have been a 2-score victory for the Kansas City Chiefs if Steve Spagnuolo hadn't taken his foot off the gas and just started playing soft on that last drive. The Chiefs were, I mean, literally, in the second half, the Raiders could not do anything to move the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs. Turk Wharton and Leo Chenal were absolute menaces in this game. We'll get to that. But I'm not Leo Chenal, I'm sorry, George Karlaftis. Leo Chenal was a menace in this game too. Leo Chenal, George Karlaftis, and Turk Wharton, all three were menaces in this game. But George Karlaftis needs to start getting his props, because he's put back-to-back stellar games together. And he's one of the best defensive linemen in this league at this point. And he's never mentioned in that same, tier of player. But you look at his statistics and you look at his pressure numbers, and he's as good as anybody.
No, and man, the defense today, injury stacking up for this Kansas City Chiefs team, still being undefeated, and I think that they are far from playing a perfect game through 8 weeks of the NFL season. But they get it done, and they got it done in a really impressive way today, and against a Raiders team that I don't think is particularly talented, Rocky, but it's still a Raiders team that always finds a way to play this Chiefs team tough. We know about the Christmas Day loss last year, and we know all the trash talk, the Kermit puppet from training camp, and everything that's gone into this rivalry over the last couple of seasons, especially. But these games always seem to be kind of grinded out games, and the Kansas City Chiefs find a way to get it done, even though the injuries are continuing to stack up. So I want to get into everything about this game. I want to get into George Karlaftis and the defensive line and the way the defense really stepped up today. We had one of the best goal line stands that you're ever going to see, and we're certainly going to talk about that tonight. And we're going to talk about the injuries and everything else. But where I really want to start, Rocky, is with the offense and what this Chiefs offense did today, because this has been the biggest talking point of the season so far for the Kansas City Chiefs. Is like, yeah, the defense still looks great. That still looks like a Super Bowl caliber defense on that side of the ball. The coming off of last season, where they were absolutely carried by their defensive unit, and the offense hasn't found a way to kind of make it all work. Now, injuries and everything piling up, and you have to go out and trade for DeAndre Hopkins, because at this point you're basically desperate for any kind of wide receiver that you can field that can show any kind of consistency. And so you go out, you make that move, and even against a lowly Raiders team that still always finds a way to play you tough, the Chiefs offense looked pretty good today. A couple of mistakes, some offensive line issues, another bad turnover, but that's expected at this point from the Kansas City Chiefs. But overall, I think you got to be thrilled with the state of this Chiefs offense today. Like, just based on everything that they're dealing with right now, all of the guys that they have lost, the offensive line inconsistencies that it feels like are going to plague them the entire season. And really, Patrick Mahomes, for the most part, just not really looking like himself through the first 7 weeks of the season. I think this was one of the best games Mahomes has played all year, aside from the game against the New Orleans Saints, who look like one of the worst teams in football. Like, you take the wins where you can get them, Rocky, and the Chiefs continue to win and remain undefeated. And it still feels like Patrick Mahomes is actually still figuring things out and turning things on. And it still feels like there's another level that this offense can go, despite all of the things that are plaguing them so far this season.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, Mahomes had a lot of Mahomes-ish moments in this game, right? Where the play broke down, he extended the play with his legs, and he found somebody, you know, you know, and distributed the ball to him. I thought he played really well within himself. His interception, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those rough things. The ball's tipped. Um, Wanya Morris put him in an impossible situation, backing him up in the end zone there. There was nowhere for him to go. He had to try to get the ball downfield. So that one, you're kind of like, it sucks, but I wouldn't put that 100% on Mahomes. I thought for the most part, Mahomes really was a good general of the offense and didn't put the ball in harm's way and took what the defense gave him and then didn't try anything, didn't try to play hero ball, right? He knew that his defense could get him the ball back and get enough stops that he could win this football game, which is exactly what happened, especially with that goal line stand that you mentioned. I thought that Kareem Hunt ran the ball hard, if not the most successful game we've seen from him. He ran the ball hard and he did enough. I think that you saw out of DeAndre Hopkins a glimmer of what it can be. Obviously, like, he came so late in the week, any kind of production out of him was going to be great. But I think that you saw just his savviness and just the fact that he's a big target that can just go up and get a ball with sure hands. Like, that's going to be huge for the Chiefs, especially if they get Juju back. And if at some point, knock on wood, around playoffs, we get Hollywood Brown back, this defense is all of a sudden going to look really dangerous again. But in the meantime, DeAndre Hopkins looks like a solid option in the receiving game. And then you knew that Kelsey was going to come up big against the Raiders. Like, they were going to scheme Kelsey open, and Kelsey was always going to have a big game in this one, just because the Raiders have bad linebackers, and Kelsey always he thrives on rivalry games and big games.
Yeah, and I want to get into DeAndre Hopkins, and we'll have the snap counts and stuff for you a little bit later. So I don't have like a definitive snap total from DeAndre Hopkins, but and a very limited sample size, Hopkins did enough to make you feel good about the addition and make you feel like he is certainly going to bring something to this team that they have been missing. And I just love the idea of Patrick Mahomes to DeAndre Hopkins. It feels like it's something as Chiefs fans we've been chasing for a while now, with a player the caliber of DeAndre Hopkins, even at this age. Like, he's still bringing something to the table that I think is unique and something that we haven't really seen, like, in terms of his skill set to the table for Patrick Mahomes in this offense. But I think the most encouraging thing that we saw today, Rocky, and it was a game plan. It was something that out of the gate today, Rocky, they were attacking downfield. That was the game plan going into Las Vegas this week against this Raiders team. That was what they installed this week on the offensive side of the ball with Andy Reid, was we are going to pass the football and we are going to try to take some shots downfield. And that's something we haven't really seen from the Chiefs so far. There's been a few here and there, but it's been grinded out, run the ball, hard-nosed football, ball control offense to try to limit some of the issues that we have along the offensive line, some of the turnovers, whatever, all the things that have plagued the Chiefs over the last several years. And today it was like out of the gate, it was Mahomes, shots over the middle of the field, trying to make plays with his arm. And compared to last week, where he didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver until late in the game, it was immediate this week. And so it's like all the things that we've been concerned about and all the injuries and everything, like, we're still sitting here talking about an undefeated football team that's still figuring things out as they go. They still have the best coaching staff in all of the NFL. And they still have Patrick Mahomes, who can turn it on and figure it out when he absolutely needs to. And I think we needed this kind of game, even if it was against the lowly Raiders. Like, we needed this kind of Mahomes performance to know that he could just go do it again when he needs to. And this isn't something that's going to plague the rest of the season, because we know he can turn it on in the playoffs. But they did it out of the gate today, and they did it for the entirety of the game. Really, like, there was some bad moments, ups and downs, like there is in every single Chiefs performance. But Mahomes came out, he played well, and he looked like the Mahomes that we're used to seeing, where when the game's on the line, when you really need something to happen, he's going to go out and make it happen. And he absolutely did that today. And that's why, like, coming out of this game, even in a one possession game against the lowly Raiders, I'm feeling as confident about this undefeated Chiefs team as I think I felt all season, even despite a couple more injuries on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's because the one possession game wasn't actually a one possession game. If the Chiefs wanted to, I feel like this could have been a 3 possession game. And let's face it, all this talk that they had last year about the Mahomes rules out of Antonio Pierce and that they were going to treat Mahomes like the Detroit Pistons treated a young Michael Jordan in their first 3 playoff matches, and that was going to be the solution. They found the solution to stopping Mahomes. That was all booty juice because you didn't stop Mahomes today. Mahomes was the reason why the Chiefs offense was clicking and all these and so it was good to see a game like this that Mahomes was able to come out in the regular season against a lowly team and then play as well as he did on a team that was boasting that they thought they could rough him up and that he wasn't a tough enough guy to handle it. Like anybody who thought that Mahomes wasn't tough enough to handle the quote unquote Mahomes rules doesn't know ball and hasn't been watching football. And so I mean, I can't be happier that in the same span of time where the Raiders like brought an entire GD marching band to welcome Tom Brady into their organization as a fake owner because they need some kind of positive, like press and media to make people think that they're an actual NFL team, that a bunch of those posers and phony ass players just got their butts kicked all over the place today. Let's face it. The Chiefs shot themselves in the foot a few times with penalties, but as far as like a talent level in an actual football game and statistics, the Chiefs dominated the second half. The Raiders barely even had the ball until that last long drive that the Chiefs let them go on, right? The Raiders are a fake ass team. They're not even a real football team anymore. I wouldn't be like they're the reason why the NFL needs a relegation down to like the USFL, like the CFL, USFL, and XFL should have like a round robin of their champions, and whoever it is should get to replace the Oakland Raiders or Las Vegas Raiders next year. And while I'm at it crapping on the Raiders, their field looked like garbage today. The turf was coming up like what?
Yeah.
Do you not water the thing?
That multi-billion-dollar stadium.
Oh my god! They can't pay the water. Like that's why they had to bring in Brady. They can't afford to pay the damn water bill and water the field. It looked like it was horrible. And so they're a garbage organization ran by garbage people with garbage players, and the Chiefs took care of business. And yeah, I'm a homer, but I hate the Raiders, and I always will. And I'm glad that we kicked their butts today.
All right. Well, now that Rocky has gotten all that hatred out of his heart for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, I saw so much more hatred. Just tune into Beach season in the next episode. It'll be way more hate filled there.
So I don't want to. I don't want to overreact to this performance in this game because, as you mentioned, like I think the Raiders are one of the least talented teams in all of the NFL. Like they're not a good football team. I don't think Antonio Pierce is a good head coach. I think that they have. Oh my God. Sorry. I was watching the Chicago Bears versus the Washington Commanders on in the background, and Jaden Daniels just hit a Hail Mary walk-off touchdown to beat the Bears. It's tip pass at the goal line that was caught by Noah Brown on the deflection. Wow. What an insane play. Okay, but anyway, so back to the Raiders. I don't think that they are a well-run organization by any means. I don't think that they're a particularly talented football team, but as is the case with the Chiefs over the last several years, it doesn't really matter week to week who they're playing. It doesn't really matter in the regular season as long as they keep getting enough wins to get to the playoffs, because we know when it comes to the postseason, they can go up against anybody, they can challenge anybody, and they can make enough plays. They've got enough Hall of Famers. They've got enough talent to compete with anybody and get to where they want to go. So we have to change the way that we actually break down this team and the way that we try to analyze them on a weekly basis, where now it's far more than, you want to see them come out and dominate every week or put up 40 points a game, or the defense just looks like the best defense in all of the NFL. It's situationally, where can they improve on a weekly basis? Where can they overcome the injuries and the players that they're losing on a weekly basis at this point. And so I thought we saw a lot of that today from this Chiefs team. I thought we saw a lot of fight from this Chiefs team today. And I think all of that is what you need to see at this point. And the way that we change the way that we break down this team, I think that's really important, because at the end of the day right now, and this is how they've operated for the last several years, it's be healthy enough for the postseason. And with the way the injuries have stacked up this season, Rocky, right now it's just survive the gauntlet and make sure you get the guys back and healthy for the postseason. And so as long as we're continuing to see them do that on a weekly basis, and that's what we're doing, and we see small signs of improvement, and then you're going to add in DeAndre Hopkins a little bit more as we move on here, I'm going to feel pretty good about it. And I think the biggest thing for me from today's game was Travis Kelce's involvement. And that was out of the gate, Rocky. First play of the game on offense, it was a screen to Travis Kelce that goes absolutely nowhere. I think it even lost a yard. But then a couple plays later, we see a big chunk gain to him down the middle of the field. And it was all day. It looked like old vintage Travis Kelce, but I think there was also an emphasis where, like you mentioned with the Raiders linebackers, we have a matchup here that we know we can exploit. We know we slow play things on offense, and Andy Reid saves things and whatever. And sometimes they just kind of get by with the bare minimum. But they needed this kind of game. I think they needed this kind of performance from Travis Kelce, and he finishes with 90 yards, has a touchdown, looks like total vintage Travis Kelce in this offense. And with all of the injuries, because you're feeling great about, Juju, and then all of a sudden Juju's hurt, and now you're down, and now even Sky Moore goes to IR this week, and you're just, and not that Sky Moore had any expectations or whatever, but you're down another body. You go make the Hopkins trade, and we're all excited about that, but he didn't get to Kansas City till Thursday, so he's not going to have a massive role. The fact that they can put in this Travis Kelce whenever they want and get this kind of performance out of him whenever they want is still really encouraging. And I think Chiefs fans just needed to see that they can do that when they want to, even though we're certainly not going to get that on a weekly basis anymore.
I think this guy Moore was walking past Brett Veach's office and overheard him talk about releasing him. And then he suddenly slipped on a puddle of milk that was on the floor. And then it was like Diesel in the movie Friday.
Surprise,
where he's like, my neck,
my core muscle injury.
Yeah. Oh, my neck, my neck and my back. You can't release me because I'm on IR. Yeah, it was like surprise. Suddenly he got injured right when he had a terrible drop for the third week in a row, and the Chiefs signed a wide receiver. But yeah, no, I think another good thing about this game is that we've seen the ascension of Noah Gray over the last couple of weeks. He continues to make clutch plays. We got more than one catch out of Justin Watson this game, which I feel like anytime you get 3 catches or more out of Justin Watson, it's impossible for the Chiefs to lose the game, because he's always good for 1 first down, but we got 3 solid catches out of him. That's 3 times the Justin Watson that we normally need to win the football game. And so, in general, I thought that the only downside I really, really saw in this game was the struggles of the left tackle, especially on the inside move. You saw Wanya Morris, he had a Kingsley game like he had against Cincinnati. And so now you have to think, okay, is this just going to be a situation where they try to ride the hot hand? But when I mean ride the hot hand, it's like the guy who's really struggling the least at the moment, right? Wanya had been good the last couple of weeks, but he had a really hard time out there today. And so you don't feel great about the Chiefs left tackle situation moving forward. So that's a definite concern right now for this football team. Aside from that, I feel pretty good about the rest of the offense, especially with DeAndre Hopkins, especially with the Chiefs depth at tight end, with Travis Kelce stepping up like he did, and with Noah Gray. Now, obviously, I am in deep personal mourning for the loss of Jody Fortson on that onside kick. As the president of the Jody Fortson fan club, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to need to take a while to really come to terms before I'm able to make any sort of public statement on the depth and severity of that loss. But in general, the Chiefs offense looks pretty good.
So I assume we'll get some kind of update from Andy Reid when he speaks to the media after the game on Jody Fortson. That is a bummer, because another thing we saw from the Chiefs today was multiple tight end sets. And That's something that has been really effective for the Kansas City Chiefs over the last couple of seasons, and it was really effective again today. And some of that was one, Noah Gray has looked really good the last couple of weeks. Travis Kelce's heavily involved, and then you can put Jody Fortson in, and the Chiefs know they can rely on him in that role because he knows the offense. Now it's if Fortson is down for the year, it's going to be back to Jared Wiley, who I don't think is ready for a significant role in this offense. So that might affect things moving forward. But that's something for Chiefs fans to definitely keep an eye on. But you talk about the tackle situation, and I want to get into that before we talk about the rest of the offense, because today it was the Travis Kelce show. And we'll get into DeAndre Hopkins, and obviously we're going to talk about Kareem Hunt, who continues to be impressive for the Chiefs. But I do think moving forward, as you know, the Chiefs try to work DeAndre Hopkins in more, and maybe Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be back at some point. And, you know, Isaiah Pacheco and Hollywood Brown still have a chance to return for the Chiefs at some point, but it's certainly not going to be anytime soon. So I don't think you should expect that's around the corner. But the biggest thing that could help improve this offense down the stretch is the offensive line improvement. And the offensive line for me, Rocky, I talked about this the last couple of weeks, really. I think I even joined our friends at Arrowhead Pride and talked to them about it a couple of weeks ago. I think the Chiefs' offensive line's been really disappointing this season. And maybe that some of that is my expectations for Kingsley Suamataia were way too high. And some of that is the Chiefs' own doing coming into the season. But then it's not just, Wanye not necessarily looking like he's a star player or something like that. I don't think that they've gotten the best out of Trey Smith at times this year. I don't think they've gotten the best out of Joe Thuney at times this year. Jawan Taylor has straight up been a liability at times this year. And then today was very reminiscent from the left side of Kingsley's week 2 against the Cincinnati Bengals, where Trey Hendrickson just absolutely wrecked the Chiefs all day long. That was that kind of performance today from Wanye Morris. Now, he doesn't get yanked the way that Kingsley does, and maybe it's the fact that he's a second-year player instead of a rookie, and the Chiefs are willing to give him a little bit longer of a leash than they were the rookie early in the season. But Wanye was straight up bad today. He gave up multiple pressures, gave up a sack, got called for multiple penalties, and just looked like he was in bad position all day long. This is what they have to figure out. If they're going to keep piecing these things together offensively and, running out these veteran players who were seemingly discarded by a lot of other NFL teams and trying to find a way to make this thing work as they keep moving forward on the offensive side of the ball, which I still have lots of confidence that they can make that happen. The offensive line simply just has to be better, Rocky. And we've talked about the schedule. Like, thankfully, they got the brutal part of their schedule out of the way, and somehow they're still undefeated. Somehow they've managed to get through all of that 7-0 and still look like one of the best teams in the NFL. And so now they've got a little bit more time down the stretch, and unfortunately the bye's already out of the way, but they can workshop that stuff and they can figure things out offensively. But the way that would work the best is if this offensive line puts it all together and starts really playing like the unit that we expected them to be. Because coming into the season, we thought this is a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, especially if they get things figured out at left tackle. And through 7 weeks, even though they're undefeated, I think that it's fair to say that the biggest criticism of them through 7 contests is that the offensive line has just underperformed and has been really inconsistent. And I think that has lended to a lot of Patrick Mahomes' inconsistencies this season.
Well, yeah, I mean, if your blind side isn't covered, you don't feel confident in the protection, then he's going to bail earlier. He's going to try to get outside the pocket. That cuts the field in half on the number of receivers he can pass to at that point. And then he's also going to be throwing off platform, right? Like just feeling just lack of pocket security and lack of pocket comfort, or just pressures in general. Yeah, they affect his play immensely. And I think it's almost like it's one of those things where the thing that you worry about is that, okay, so the Chiefs did play against Bosa last week, and I guess they did okay. But it's like, other than that, the Chiefs have gone against 2 premier pass rushers, Trey Hendrickson and Max Crosby. And both of those games, their left tackle got made to look like they didn't even belong on the field. Yeah. And for different reasons. Like Kingsley Suamataia, he's got the lateral quickness, but his hand placement is off, and he gets out over his skis, and he has bad bad leverage. Wanya Morris has pretty good hand placement. His lateral quickness isn't the best. So what would they do? They were hitting him with that inside move, and he was trying to set the outside shoulder, and then he'd get beat on the inside. And so, regardless, the Chiefs have got to figure it out. And then Jawan Taylor just continues to be barely serviceable. He's got all the tools, but he's just barely serviceable. He gets beat. He's just not good at anything, but at the same time, kind of passable at everything.
Weekly with Taylor, it's like, did he get called for a bunch of flags? Well, then you're like, okay, well, at least he didn't get called for a bunch of flags. And this week, thankfully for him, Wanya was the one that was getting flagged left and right.
Yeah, thankfully it was Wanya, and then we'll get into it, but Joshua Williams as well.
Yes.
Jeez Louise. But yeah, so honestly, at this point, do the Chiefs try to find a veteran that they can bring in? Like I said this on Beach Season last week. Like if we hit like week 13 and this is still an issue, I'm calling up David Bakhtiari off the couch and being like, listen, I don't know if your back is held together with like string cheese or not, but if I get 3 good games out of you at left tackle, then sure, I'll roll with it because it's 3 games of better than what I have right now. And so you can't feel confident if you're Patrick Mahomes in the protection on that side without holding somebody back to assist. And then you're essentially taking away the running back's ability to be an outlet. And so it's rough. It's rough any way you slice it at the left tackle position for the Chiefs right now.
And before we move off the offensive side of the ball, I do want to mention Kareem Hunt again, who had another nice showing, Rocky. It wasn't the most efficient one, certainly. And, I wanted to see a little bit of a bigger day from Hunt going up against this Raiders defense. It has been one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. But again, these divisional matchups just never play out on paper exactly the way they're supposed to. But Kareem Hunt finishes the game, 21 carries, 59 yards, finds the end zone again, only 2.8 per carry. But again, looks good enough. Looks like Kareem Hunt is going to be a major part of this offense moving forward. If they find a way to get Isaiah Pacheco back into the mix, great. But I think offensively, at least what was so encouraging today, again, was the ability to be like, oh, we've been a ball control, power run offense for the vast majority of the season. Today, we're just going to decide to throw the ball a little bit more. We're going to decide to spread it around a little bit more. We're going to decide to attack the Raiders over the middle of the field, and we're going to find success doing that, even though we don't have a ton of reliable pass catchers right now. But Travis Kelce can go drop 10 for 90 and a touchdown on this Raiders team. And then Kareem Hunt still gives you enough. He still picks up the tough yards when you need him to. Samaje Perine has a really big 3rd down conversion at one point in this game. Like, the Chiefs continue weekly to get just enough out of their backfield to the point where it's just not a negative. And then if they're going to have some explosive weeks where they're the focal point of the offense, that's great. They're just consistent. It's the most consistent part of the offense that you can at least bank on each and every week, even when the offensive line's not playing great, even when the passing game's not working, even though it was today. The run game is something that at least we can point to one part of this offense on a weekly basis and say, we know what they're always going to get out of that. That's never going to be the net negative of this team on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, I think one of the side effects of the quote unquote Mahomes rules is that in order for the Mahomes rules to work, you have to put hands on Patrick Mahomes. And in order to put hands on Patrick Mahomes, you're not going to be dropping back into like dime and nickel coverage a ton, right? You're going to be coming at Patrick Mahomes. You're going to be trying to hit him. When you're coming at him and trying to hit him, that means you have more guys in the box. That means you're keying in on the run game more. And so it's harder to run the ball. It's easier to pass the ball. I think that's also why Travis Kelce had such a big day today. They weren't exactly bracketing him out there like other teams have. I think there's a lot of our wide receivers are getting single man coverage on the outside. They were man covering DeAndre Hopkins all day long, and Xavier Worthy. And so I think that the part that sucks for Kareem Hunt is that the Mahomes rules are also kind of like the Hunt rules just by de facto. But I think that the Mahomes rules also shot him in the foot because it made him one-dimensional on defense as well, and it freed up Patrick Mahomes that once he broke the pocket and everybody was in chase, there wasn't an extra defensive back or two defensive backs back there to make a play, and wide receivers were able to find space.
Yeah, and it was just another one of those encouraging performances where, you know, at this point we're looking for the positives. And I was so hyped up about the offense and the passing game just looking a little competent. I almost forgot to talk about DeAndre Hopkins, who, you know, made his presence felt immediately for the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, comes in on the third play of the game for them on offense to start things off today. Critical moment, third down, and immediately gets a schemed up target for a first down for the Chiefs. And then has a couple other nice plays for them for the most part. Had another one where Mahomes overthrew him, but not a ton of snaps for DeAndre Hopkins, and that's not something we should expect. But you saw enough, Rocky. You saw enough to be encouraged moving forward about what he's going to bring to the offense and the reliability of a veteran player of his caliber, where it's like, you know, Hopkins isn't going to totally burn you downfield, even though if you look at a lot of the advanced metrics last season with the Tennessee Titans, he was a very good downfield wide receiver when he was healthy and on the field. But what he has always excelled at is that he is a chain mover and a possession wide receiver who catches absolutely everything. And for the most part, his entire career, he's been an outside wide receiver, but he can step right into the Rashee Rice role because he is certainly talented enough to do that. He can step into the Juju Smith-Schuster role and be that power slot for the Kansas City Chiefs who wins on the easy things over the middle of the field. And you know he's still talented enough to create and make plays that way. So I saw enough from Hopkins today that I'm really excited about Patrick Mahomes to DeAndre Hopkins moving forward.
I think you saw that very first route he ran, the very first target and reception he had, and you said, all right, I've seen enough for today to feel good about DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, that was the best route Chiefs receivers ran all year. Like, the Chiefs just haven't had a route runner like that since they lost Tyreek Hill, to be honest. Like DeAndre Hopkins is one of the top 3, 4, 5 route runners in the NFL. And the fact that he was just able to break it off and find the soft spot in the zone, and that he's mature enough, and he's essentially as savvy as Travis Kelce is at finding the weaknesses in the zone in a wide receiver's body. He's what the Chiefs have been missing. He's a great downfield threat because he's a great contested catch guy because he's 6'3" and 215 pounds, right? Yeah, sure, he's not as fast as he used to be, but he doesn't have to be. He knows outside leverage. He knows inside leverage. He knows where he needs to be in the route in order to win the ball. And he knows how to get body position to win the ball. He would have had another big pickup if Mahomes hadn't missed him, right? Like, Mahomes overthrew him that one play. And so I think that moving forward, as him and Mahomes get on the same page, as he gets in the playbook and he learns more and more, I think we're going to see a steady ramp up. I think next week, it may be a little bit more than we saw this week, but I'd say give him a month and he's going to be a focal point into the offense. And he should be, because right now, I mean, aside from Travis Kelce, like, he's by far the best offensive weapon that we have, right? And so, I mean, I think that he is that second, like, 1-2 punch along with Kelce. And then when Juju comes back, I mean, Juju will be a nice complementary piece, but in general, like, DeAndre Hopkins gives you that juice on offense that you feel confident the Chiefs are going to be able to move the ball as the season moves on.
So I totally agree. I think they're going to work him in slow, but I think Andy Reid talked about it this week too and mentioned that, like, he's such a veteran player. Like, he is such a smart football player that it's just about him learning, like, the little intricacies, where it's not, I think for a younger player who gets traded or gets brought up or whatever, it's, you know, there's can be at times a learning curve that takes years. And I don't think that's going to be the case for DeAndre Hopkins because he is such a seasoned NFL veteran. And honestly, Rocky, with what we saw from him this week, like, I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Chiefs deploy him in a significant way next week. They got a Monday Night Football matchup against a talented Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And I know the Buccaneers, you know, started the season looking really strong, looking like one of the best offenses in football. And now all of a sudden, Chris Godwin's out for the year and Mike Evans is down for a significant amount of time. So maybe that matchup on paper doesn't look as good right now as it did a couple of weeks ago. But the Buccaneers secondary has been one of the worst secondaries in football this season. And so if there's a game where you could say, let's just throw him out there and deal with a little bit of the miscommunications and growing pains and just pick this thing up on the fly because he's a veteran player who can figure it out as we go. And at the very least, we can put him in that Rice role and just say, hey, just go find some open space and get open, and Mahomes will find you to make some plays. It seems like the Buccaneers are a perfect matchup for that. Like, I would not be surprised if DeAndre Hopkins has a significant role for the Chiefs next week. Like, it seems like that the way that defense has played, and like just even based on like how they performed this week, like it seems like that's a perfect matchup for the Chiefs to just say, yeah, we're figuring out a lot of other things as we go. DeAndre Hopkins will be fine. Let's just get him out there and see what he can do when the play breaks down and Mahomes has to go find him.
Well, especially like you said, because the Bucs are suffering their injuries, they have their own injuries. They have a wide receiver that you feel more confident in your defense being able to get you the ball back, right? So if there is a miscommunication that leads to a turnover, you feel confident that the Chiefs defense is going to get you the ball back. I feel like against any team in the NFL, you feel confident the Chiefs defense is going to get you the ball back because the Chiefs defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL, and that's what they've done all year long, is go out there and get the offense the ball back when they need to. And so, yeah, I could totally see that happening 100%. And there are, like, the defense played amazing yet again, but there is some depth concerns starting to develop in the secondary, especially at outside cornerback, and with, like I get brought up here, like Najee Johnson.
Yeah. And so I see a lot of you guys in the comment section. We'll try to get to a couple of your observations and comments before we get out of here. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing here on Foolish Club Media. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our YouTube page. We're doing tons of video stuff over there, so we appreciate any help and support that we can get right now. But before we get into the Najee Johnson concussion, because you already mentioned Joshua Williams, and that is legitimately concerning for this defense moving forward. And I think we saw a few glimpses of the absence of Jalen Watson, especially early in this game. But I do want to talk about the goal line stand, Rocky, because you're just not going to see a better goal line stand across the entire NFL season than what we got today for that defense. Like, catastrophic moment in the game. Chiefs offense totally falls apart. Bad turnover. Raiders instantly inside the 10-yard line. And what does the Chiefs defense do? 3 straight plays. Defensive line, linebackers just absolutely decimate the Raiders. Absolutely crush them and hold them at the goal line. But you're at the 1-yard line now at this point. And Gardner Minshew drops back to try to make something happen. And the Raiders are actually being aggressive, even though Antonio Pierce has been one of the most conservative coaches in football this season. And the Chiefs bring the pressure. George Karlaftis gets home. And it's a game-defining series for the defense. And I think a season-defining series, Rocky. Like, even though the injuries are stacking up now, and I'm starting to get worried about this defense, but man, if they can get healthy, they get Charles Omenihu back at some point. They get Mike Dana back at some point. Hopefully Jalen Watson's back by the postseason. Like, this defense is special again this season, and I don't want to take it for granted because that series alone just shows, and I thought perfectly encapsulated and kind of defined the Chiefs over the last 2 seasons. The way that they stepped up in that catastrophic moment in the game that could have been a turning point for literally any other team in the league. And the Chiefs did exactly what you expect them to do, because this is what we expect from them at this point.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, Turk Wharton on that goal line stand, literally, like, Turk Wharton looks like he is the nastiest mofo I feel like in the world that gets no love whatsoever. He wakes up in the morning and he takes a list of your goals and dreams and hopes for the day, manifests them into reality, and then eats them for breakfast every single day. Like, that is who Turk Wharton is. He was unstoppable on that goal line stand. Across the board, Leo Chenal, George Karlaftis, Chris Jones, just that front 7 on that goal line stand That's the best. That's the best you're going to see. You can't watch a better series of football out of a front seven than you'll see out of those 4 plays right there. Like that is textbook defense. And it is, you're right. And it is a season defining moment because it was on the heels of the Chiefs' worst series of the season, right? Wanya Morris gets back-to-back holding penalties, nearly gets a safety, right? Like borderline gets a safety. Very next play, Pat gets the ball tipped, and it's an interception. They return it back to the 2-yard line, and that's the whole game. The momentum of the game hung on the balance of that goal line stand. And the GD Chiefs defense put their foot in the ground and did their best. Remember the Titans moment. And Steve Spagnuolo was probably on the sideline saying, I don't want them to gain another yard. Right? You could see it happening. And they went out there and they drove them backwards. They didn't just stop them, they drove the mofos backwards. And that's the personality, and that's the MO of this defense.
It's this Chiefs defense is so fun, and the parts just fit together so well, and they just have so many studs, and they've got so much depth. And now, the Jalen Watson injury is a real bummer for a third year player who was a 7th round draft pick, who was breaking out this season. And we've seen plenty of potential and flashes from Jalen Watson in the past couple of seasons, but he was legitimately a difference maker for this Chiefs defense over the first 6 weeks of the season. And then he goes down, suffers a serious injury. And now it's like, yeah, I thought that's where we were the deepest. I thought the secondary and the cornerback room, like I thought they were good there. If we were good at any one spot on the team, I thought it was there. And now Najee Johnson, who the team's really high on, but he's a player who was coming back from a season-ending injury last season and still working his way back, still learning, still growing pains and whatever, but had surpassed Joshua Williams enough to where the Chiefs were confident that like Najee Johnson is the guy over Joshua Williams. And Joshua Williams is a very frustrating player, but a player that they're going to have to lean on moving forward. And what goes not talked about enough in all of this is that all of these players are from the same draft class, and Joshua Williams was a higher draft pick of Jalen Watson and Najee Johnson. And Joshua Williams is the guy that when you look at the testing numbers and the measurements and all of that, the athletic profiles, like he's the guy that should be performing really well in this Steve Spagnuolo defense. It gets the most out of cornerbacks, no matter who you put back there. And Joshua Williams is just simply one of the most inconsistent players on the defense for the Chiefs. And we saw that today where, bad penalties, just bad plays, frustrating plays where he's out of position. And it's like, this is what they're going to have to lean on moving forward. Now, Najee Johnson suffers the concussion, and, that might not be a long-term thing. But at this point, with concussions in the NFL, I think it's safe to be like, you expect you miss at least a game and hope for the best. If you can come back in a week, great, but it doesn't happen all that often anymore. And so you expect they're at least going to be shorthanded there. Maybe we see them make another move in the cornerback room. They freed up some cap space this week by restructuring Jawan Taylor. So they've got a little bit more money to maybe try to do something else before the deadline, but it's hard to trade for corners because there's just not a ton of good ones. And I think we're just going to have to live with a little bit of frustrating play in the secondary for the Chiefs moving forward, because it seems like it's going to be Joshua Williams and unless they can figure some other things out there. But thankfully, they've got some depth at the safety room. Maybe they can try to rotate things and cover things up for a little bit here.
Yeah, your boy Jamari Connor's going to play more football. I mean, with Joshua Williams, I think you see why certain guys, regardless of their length and size, why they played at Fayetteville State, right? And now Marshall's not the biggest program in the world, but it's a whole hell of a lot bigger than Fayetteville State, which is where Najee Johnson played from, right? And so there's a level of competition that these guys just didn't face in college that's a total unknown when you draft them, right? And so I think that's something that we're seeing with Joshua Williams. That the Chiefs are to make any more moves before the trade deadline, which I don't think they will. I think that they would look to bring in a cornerback. Obviously, a dream scenario that's not going to happen, I'm going to say it's not going to happen, would be to bring L'Jarius Sneed back home if the Titans already dealing guys. Like, give them the pick back. We don't need that third rounder. Bring Sneed home and let's finish this thing out. Now obviously there's money issues there, and there's a lot of things that would have to go in before that could happen. But there is a definite concern with Joshua Williams, and even with Najee Johnson. Like the thing is that Najee Johnson is better than Joshua Williams, but he still wasn't playing great. Like
Yeah.
he picked up a couple of penalties last week. He picked up one this week. He allowed a couple big plays. You know, he was passable, but it's not.
Yeah.
There was a definite drop off
Far
between
from
him and
elite,
Taylor
which
Watson.
is
Yeah,
the way Jalen Watson was playing before he went.
exactly. Like even before Najee Johnson went out the concussion, you thought to yourself, the Chiefs could probably use to bring somebody else in here because there's a little bit more of a drop off here than what you're comfortable with. And that doesn't mean the Chiefs defense is bad anymore, right? And like if they are gonna have to switch up the way that they play defense, I mean, leaning on the safeties is a little bit smarter of a play because you know you got Shamari Connor, you got Jaden Hicks, you got Justin Reed, and all three of those guys can play in the slot, right? And so you can mix those things up a little bit. It's just, oh man, you really do need one more outside cornerback right now. And there's not a lot of good answers there on the roster currently.
I think it's going to be, like you just mentioned, it's going to be Steve Spagnuolo, the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. Just doing what he can to try to cover up the issues at cornerback moving forward. Like we know Trent McDuffie's a superstar player who can take away a side of the field by himself. And so that's an advantage that you already have as a defensive unit, like knowing that you have that caliber of player who can just handle business by himself on an island and you don't got to worry about him on a weekly basis. And then you got enough depth in the safety room and versatile playmakers that you can try to cover up some of the other inefficiencies at the cornerback position. And that's what they're going to have to do moving forward. Thankfully, Rocky, and I think something you already mentioned was, George Karlaftis was tremendous this week. And we've seen George really come on after a slow start to the season. And that defensive line has really performed above expectations. We saw Mike Pennell make a big play today. Like Turk Wharton has been amazing this season. And they're doing all this without Mike Dana in the mix, who is one of the most underrated players along the Chiefs defensive line. Chris Jones, of course, we know who he is, all-world player. But George Karlaftis, after the slow start, is starting to take a turn. And at some point, they're going to get Charles Omenihu back. And this Chiefs defensive line just looks like a bunch of game wreckers. They just look like a bunch of maulers. Now, maybe you want to see the pressure numbers go up a little bit more. And, maybe you're afraid that, Chris Jones being the guy that can really only be the guy that gets on a snap to snap basis after the quarterback. But you're seeing improvements from all of the situational players on a weekly basis along the Chiefs defensive line. And the reason they can cover up some of those issues in the secondary, and the reason I think this is still the best defense in the NFL when they are healthy, is because of the depth that they have demonstrated across the board and the way that they are getting the most out of these guys on a weekly basis. And a lot of that is thanks to players like George Karlaftis. Like, this Chiefs defense is still very, very good. It is certainly not going to be a liability, even though they're starting to get banged up on that side of the ball. And a lot of that has to do with their coaching staff. Like this team, even after a decent offensive performance this week, this is still a defensive first Chiefs team, and we need to make sure that we continue to remember that.
Oh, without a doubt, they're a defensive first team. And I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a front seven. I mean, the Chiefs linebacking core, like for as much struggles as Nick Bolton had early in the season, the last couple of weeks, the combination of Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquil, and Nick Bolton have looked amazing, right? Like they're playing lights out right now at linebacker. And I think you've seen that reflected in the production of the tight ends. Like Brock Bowers had three receptions in the first quarter, and then they essentially shut him down until the fourth quarter. Right? They didn't look his direction at all. And so the linebackers looked awesome. The defensive line looks awesome. And then I don't want to feel like I'm poo-pooing on the secondary too much, but because even though there is some questions, and Steve Spagnuolo is an amazing coach, they also have one of the best position coaches in the NFL, and Dave Merritt, right? To help figure out what's going on in the secondary, right? And he's a guy who's proven time and time again that he can take, normal guys and get the most out of them as well. And so this Chiefs defense is the identity of this team. They have the best player in the history of football at quarterback, and the defense is the identity of this team. That's how good this defense is that collectively they are currently more of the identity of this team than the Michael Jordan of football. Like, that's insane. That's insane to think about.
Yeah.
But that's this defense. That's who it is. Like, we're talking, if the Chiefs win this three-peat and they finish this three-peat off, this defense is going to go down as one of the most legendary defenses in history, right?
Yeah.
Especially because they're the reason why the Chiefs have been winning these games and getting to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. And so they're going to have to come up with a really cool name for them, like the Great Barrier Chiefs, or I don't know, whatever you want to come up with, you know, the elevator from The Shining, you know, whatever. I don't know. I'm spitballing.
You're right. I mean, last season they were most underrated unit in football somehow, despite all of us screaming at the top of our lungs all season. They were the best defense in the NFL. And then they go on the hardest postseason run by every metric you can look at in NFL history on the back of that defense. And then this season they're playing just as well. And that's after losing key players. Like, this defense is on an all-time tear right now, and they definitely deserve to be acknowledged that way. Like, you're totally right. I couldn't agree more, but they're going to have to overcome some issues the same way the offense is moving forward. But the Kansas City Chiefs, again, improved to 7-0 with a 27-20 win over the Las Vegas Raiders. And get to a couple of comments before we get out of here from our friend Crazy Chief. So they had a Muppet TD celebration. Rocky, you said no kneel downs, right? Did Veach not get your message? Assuming that's a reference to the latest episode of Veach season that I might have missed on that question, Rocky.
He left me on red. I texted Veach. He left me on red. I slid into his DMs. He blocked me. So I told him no kneel downs. Got to go for the juggler, step on their throat, finish the game, rub their faces in it. I mean, personally, I would have pulled out a Mark Davis Muppet with the worst bangs possible and done a Mark Davis Muppet celebration to get back at him. But that's why they don't let me run a football team. I'm petty as hell.
Last thing before we get out of here from our guy Elliot, if Wanye can get beat that badly, they didn't even give Kingsley a series or even a few reps, so Wanye could get a breather. Really tells you where they think he's at. So I don't disagree with that observation. I do think that the Chiefs really hoped that Kingsley Suamataia would get thrown in the fire and would pick things up at a rapid rate and figure things out because he has the physical tool set, but we know he's a very young, raw player. But it just, to me, it just feels like they're more comfortable with where Wanye is just based off of practice, based off of game performances right now, and hoping that they can keep developing Kingsley to the point where at some point down the line later this season, maybe there's a change and maybe they think he's going to go in there, or maybe it's just, hey, he's got to sit for a year and he's got to get seasoned, and Wanye is going to be the guy that we move forward with. Or maybe it's what Rocky's talking about, where it's a David Bakhtiari, or you go out and you try to add one of these veteran guys who is still floating around out there just waiting for a call mid-season to go try to make a run at a ring with a contending team. But it wasn't. It was about as bad as it gets for Wanye today, but he didn't get yanked the way that Kingsley did in week 2.
Well, part of it, you have to wonder if it's kind of like when you draft a quarterback and you're like, I'm going to sit this. You say, I'm going to sit this quarterback. The guy who's starting in front of that quarterback can get beat to hell all you want, and you're not going to pull that guy and put in the rookie quarterback. I mean, it could be one of those things where they see Kingsley's upside and they think, okay, we don't want to get this guy ruined by destroying his confidence, right? And have him just get beat over and over again. We don't care if Wanya's confidence gets destroyed because Kingsley's our future. So we're going to leave Wanya in there, let him get beat, and we're just going to ride with it. And then hopefully we'll be able to develop Kingsley, and he's going to be our stud moving forward starting next year. And it's just a long game with him.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think there's strategy and how they're deploying this at this point. And I think maybe they dialed things back because they realized they rushed this thing too quick with Kingsley, and they're willing to take their time with him because they see the upside and potential in him long term. So I do think there's absolutely something to that thought process with the Chiefs' young left tackle. But again, Kansas City Chiefs still the last undefeated team in the NFL. If you haven't yet, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing right here on Foolish Club Media. Make sure you head over to our YouTube page and join us there. We'll be back tomorrow at noon. Brand new live edition of the Daily Fix with Ron Hughley. Make sure you're on the lookout for V-Cheesin' with Rocky Magaña, Kramer Sanson. We'll be back with all that, all the shows that you know and love on a weekly basis, covering your favorite Kansas City Chiefs team as we get ready for Monday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll talk to you tomorrow at noon.